Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. I am Jeremy Ames, and today I am joined by entrepreneur Kathryn Rapp. And I am excited to dig into Kathryn's story. Kathryn was a C-level executive in the tech world who had a major health scare that caused her to take a step back and think about what she wanted for her life. It sounds like that is ultimately what has led her down the path of becoming an entrepreneur, and we're going to hear about a couple of the things that she's done over the last few years. So, Kathryn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, why don't we start with, tell us what you were doing before you became a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as a strategy consultant. I'm originally from the East Coast, although I live in Danville, California now, beautiful Danville, California. So I started my career as a strategy consultant. I was helping corporations tackle complex challenges. And then from there on, I moved in-house to an internal Pfizer strategy team. So Pfizer, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. That's where I really started gaining firsthand experience in corporate decision making at a very global scale. From there, I joined Bridgewater Associates, which is one of the world's largest and most well-known investment firms. That's really where I absolutely honed my operations.
Question.
Go for it.
Want to know what's on your baseball card, Kathryn?
So much. I have a lot of things on my baseball card. So
okay, just for the audience, I want them to appreciate this is Ray Dalio's firm, and they are super intense on feedback. So tell us a little bit about what the experience was like working at Bridgewater.
I had an amazing experience. It's not for everybody. The underlying thing about Bridgewater is that it's a very data-driven organization. That's why we had such a thing called baseball cards, where people take tests to assess who you are as an individual and who you are as a colleague, and then you get assessed on a daily basis, if not hourly, if not minute by minute basis, based on the things that you do, that you say. Every interaction is essentially judged through this dotting tool that we would have. So I could be having a meeting and we would have our dotting tools open in our iPads, and I could say, Jeremy, you get from a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 on creative thinking, but maybe a 2 on logic. Like, I love your creativity, but your logic is pretty shitty on this problem that we're trying to tackle. Yeah. And then all of those daily dots essentially make up the picture, what we call the picture of you. And that's our baseball card.
Kathryn, there is this episode of Black Mirror. I don't know if you've ever watched this series, but there's this episode of Black Mirror where it's something like that, only it's social media, and people can give you sort of a social score in the moment. And it is this crazy dystopian future where this woman's life totally goes down the toilet within one day because people start rating her. That's immediately where my head went as you're describing this. Was that super intense? Like, feeling like you have to perform in the minute and that someone else's judgment of you is going to create, friction through the system? Like, how did that work? How did that not mess with your brain?
I'm sure if you join Bridgewater Associates, it means you have gone through a very lengthy recruiting process. So this isn't something where, your average person will just be able to join this organization without knowing what you're in for. So number one, really lengthy recruiting process, and you have to buy into the culture, because it's really, if you're going to join the company, you're going to join, a really high performing performance culture. That said, I will say that my prefrontal cortex hurt every single day. At the end of the day, my brain just hurt right here from the daily logic thinking, that everybody is expected to do and expected to perform at. But it's not like no one made me join. No one makes you join any kind of organization, right? So it's something that, and it's not for everybody. There is a high attrition rate from the first 3 months of somebody joining, but then after that, if you have stayed beyond, if you really understand the culture and you get into the daily tools that we were using, if you believe in the things that Ray Dalio and the principles that are there, um, then you stay for a very, very long time. So most people actually stay for a very long time. Once you hit past the like, oh my God, what did I just do? What is this kind of crazy place? But I actually truly loved it. I honed my operations, my strategy skill sets, just playing chess every day. Um, how to analyze macroeconomic trends, navigate market complexities. You're getting an MBA on that every day through Ray Dalio, and I was there while he was still the CEO. He's since stepped down. So it's one of my most cherished memories in terms of my career, and I still am friends, and I still consider the people that I've worked with. I still have mentors there, and I still have very strong friends because you are really like in the trenches. It's almost like
Yes.
you're in the battlefield with these people. So it's one of my most treasured parts of my career. I actually didn't get to stay for that long. I stayed for about a year and a half, because my husband and I moved to the Bay Area. We just made the life. We had our first child, and we said, what kind of life do we want? And so that was basically my first pivot from a career perspective. And we decided, all right, we want to move to the Bay Area. Every time we go here, the weather is super beautiful. What are we doing? You know, we transit, and then that's where I transitioned into startups, because what do when you're here in
San
the
Francisco.
area, you're in San Francisco, you're gonna do a startup. So I joined a Portuguese company called Feedzai. It's an AI risk management firm in fintech, as my first startup experience. And that shift really ignited my passion for entrepreneurship and working for smaller companies. That's when I started realizing my my superpower is taking these small companies and turning them into large growth companies.
Interesting. And so when you left that company, was that when you went into small business ownership or?
So actually, I was working through, Feeds. Was my first startup, and then had a couple of different startups. I was with a company called Liminal, which it's a market intelligence firm that is
Yeah.
based in New York City. Um, that's when I was working as their COO, and that's when I got the unfortunate diagnosis that I got diagnosed with breast cancer in November of 2023. So about a year and a half ago. Um, I was still working with liminal and going through my chemotherapy treatments. But towards the end of my chemo, that's when I started thinking about, is this the life in the world that I want? Is this a kind of really thinking about what's important to me, what's important to my family, and I thought that this was kind of a shakeup from the universe, if you will. It's the biggest, it's not that I can think of that the universe can give you, and to thinking maybe there is something else, to do for you, instead of making all of these people rich, all these other investors and all of these other entrepreneurs. Maybe it's time for me to think about what's important and go into small business ownership on my own, or entrepreneurship on my own.
Man, so I'd never thought about it this way, but chemotherapy is something that almost forces you to sit with yourself, right? It's like you're going to have to go in however many days and sit there doing nothing except being with your thoughts. So walk us through the transformation that happened for you and what clarity you got about what you wanted and how maybe that was different from the life you'd been living.
Yeah. So, being diagnosed with something as life shattering as cancer really changes your priorities, and you start thinking about being at home a lot more. I have two young boys, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they are super active, and I missed out a lot on their first, 9 years of their life, traveling around the world, having, teams in Portugal, in New York, in Hong Kong, and in the UK. So just being on the road, something like 1 to 2 weeks a month makes you realize that, oh man, I am sitting in this, chemo chair, and I'm here. I'm being forced to listen to my own body, to collaborate with my own body, and to think about what is important to me. So that really made me realize that I have to take better care of myself. I was already very much into health and wellness, and so I became a member at this cryotherapy center. It's called U.S. Cryotherapy here in Danville. Started thinking about how inflammation has really affected, my cancer diagnosis. I'm sure my cancer was related to inflammation, which we all have inflammation in our body. It's just when it goes haywire. I like to think of inflammation as a coal inside of your fireplace, right? Your body is your fireplace, and inflammation is a piece of coal in your fireplace. It's great. It warms you up. It does positive things for you. When that piece of coal comes out of your fireplace, it can set your whole house on fire, right?
Yeah.
That's how we should think about inflammation, which is, there are benefits to it, but there's also a lot of negatives to it. So you have to figure out what it takes to reduce inflammation in your body. Throughout my chemo, I was going through US cryotherapy, trying to do whole body cryotherapy, red light therapy, normatec compression, all to alleviate the symptoms that I was experiencing. And towards the end of that, that's when towards the end of my chemo journey, right around the end of April, that's when I had that shift in mindset, thinking like maybe there's something else to that I can do here. And I started looking at local businesses around Danville. Why local businesses? The community really helped support me and my family. Our local schools, our teams, our neighbors. They were just so incredible in supporting us through my journey. I had meal trains. I'd never cooked that entire time, and I love to cook, so it was kind of like, oh my god, like so much. There's so many meals coming at us. It's just so much support, so much love, and I wanted to give back to my community in some sort of way, right? And the only way I know how to do that is to help own and grow local
Yeah.
businesses in general. So I said, all right, so let's look at small business. If I'm not going to be a C-level executive, what else can I be, right? And also contribute to my community. Let's be a business owner. Started looking at businesses around here, and one of my neighbors actually mentioned, "Hey, have you heard of this place called US Cryotherapy? They're really up your alley in terms of health and wellness and things that you're passionate about." And I was like, "I'm actually a member. I'm using them through to reduce chemo symptoms." And they were like, "Oh my god, you should think about approaching the current owners and buying it." And I did. I found out that the current owners were living in Southern California, and they weren't there. And I started really looking around the business, and I thought, maybe this is something that I could take on and grow into my own venture, and put my own spin into it.
I love that the path that got you there was you were a customer of this business, right? Um, it's one of the things we talk about as an important way to de-risk a business, right? Is if you already know it as the customer, you're already walking in with some understanding of what's there. Now, I'm guessing that while there have been no studies on this, that being a C-level executive in a startup company that's international does not contribute to lowering inflammation. Is that a fair?
It's 100% a fair
Okay.
statement.
So part of what was driving you was saying, hey, I got to take care of my health. And that means I can't be traveling all the time. I can't have this stress level and this workload. So you decide you're going to you explore this ability to buy this cryotherapy company. Okay. So give us the details. What happened? What kind of due diligence did you do? What conversations did you have with the seller? How long did it take for you to put together?
Yeah, so fortunately, with my experience in a bunch of in my startups, with my background in finance and strategy, I know how to put together a due diligence package. So I said, let's put on your corporate hat on, and how would you evaluate this business and price this business the way you would normally do, Catherine, for any other business or any other business that's evaluating your own business, right?
Great. Kathryn, can I have you slow down there?
Yeah.
Because I believe we're going to approach the curse of knowledge here, where you're going to cross over it. And you're going to be like, yeah, I just did it like I did in any other business, and you're going to move on. But I don't think that your experience is something that people broadly have. So could you literally break down how you thought about due diligence for this business based on your past experience?
You are 100% right. I think, those are the kind of things that I gloss over. And I think, hey, you must know how to do a due diligence
They
um,
don't. Help them out.
yeah, exactly. So really the first thing is you have to understand the market and the macroeconomics of that particular business. So you got to approach it in a very, what is this business? Take away that I'm a member, take away that these are my perceptions of what this business looks like. You have to analyze what is the industry. Number one, what's the industry of whatever this business is? Is it a service industry? Is it a health and wellness? How would you think about this particular business itself? And then
What did you
second,
do in this specific case, right? You got this business you're a customer of. How did you evaluate the industry?
yeah, I evaluated the industry by taking a look at what are other like businesses in the area. So number one, what are the health and industry trends that are happening right now? So cold plunging is a huge trend that's coming out. Red light therapy is another huge trend. So I started analyzing. Just forget cryotherapy in general. What are burgeoning health and wellness trends? IV therapy is a really burgeoning industry or wellness trend that's coming out. So are you number one, is the business that you're evaluating on the burgeoning up and up, or is it a stale type of industry where, every town has this type of treatment, right?
And where did you find the information to do this analysis?
Good question. There are number one, you have to do some research on the internet. There's a lot of comparative data on just health and wellness and trends out there. So there's a lot of online services to look at total addressable market. What is your service? TAM, SAM, SOM. These are total addressable market, service addressable market, and your obtainable market, meaning your actual data for that particular business in your area. Another place to go to is most towns have some sort of business guide. So if you go to your town, if you go to the town of Danville, for example, there are resources that they have put together to understand what are the kind of businesses that are coming in, and what are your expected what's the expected value of those businesses that you can expect to
Interesting.
have that in the town.
So who did you talk to at the city and what did they give you?
So there's actually a particular, I have this right now. It's a market analysis. So a lot of our town does an annual market analysis to understand what does the community look like, what are the market analytics,
What's
uh,
happening with demographics and
what's the
changes and things like
consumer
that?
demographics, the household segmentation and the profiles of households, what's the consumer demand in the market, supply assessment, and then what's the employment profile that you can imagine for your area, so that you can even start thinking about, like, what does this area look like for the type of business I'm thinking about. So they typically use, economic services that provide this information. So most towns have some sort of data that's, very easily you can download it straight from their websites.
So you went to the city, found some data there. You did some online searching to find some just comparative trends, whatever sort of reports you could find on the health and wellness industry. Where else did you look? Or
Um,
was that enough to help you get a good view of what the industry looked like?
so those are like really my two primaries. Another place actually that was helpful to me was to talk to other franchisors. So US Cryotherapy is a franchise.
So you
So
talk about
actually,
the franchisees of that model,
no, actually franchisors. So
franchisors.
other
Okay.
franchisors. So I started talking to an IV business and started getting their own data, right? So then I started understanding like, how do other franchisors think about their own businesses? Gyms. There's so many gyms out there, so it was really easy for me to go to franchisors of a rowing franchisor, something like an Orange Theory, like hit type of businesses to start understanding, how do they think about their businesses and where do they put themselves on the map in terms of, are you, what differentiates you? Are you a growth stage type of franchise? Are you, what trends is your franchise following?
Were you just doing interviews with their key salespeople, or were you actually getting franchise disclosure documents and pulling things out of those that were helping you sort of map the health and wellness space?
Both. Unfortunately, franchise disclosure documents are public. They might not be the most up to date, but they are out there because they have to disclose all of this
Yep.
information. So it's pretty easy for you to find, websites with these franchise disclosure documents.
It's an interesting strategy, though. I haven't actually talked to another entrepreneur who said, hey, now that I'm clear on the industry, I'm going to go find all the franchises in this industry and I'm going to pull that data together and sort of piece together a map of these different parts of the world as they come. What did you learn from your analysis of these franchisors?
So the reason I had to do that is because typically you can't find a lot of information on small businesses, right? They're all private. So you have to figure out what are those um, innovative ways of trying to find the information that you need in order to help make your decision on, is this something that's interesting or not. The franchise documents and the franchisors help me think of a couple of different things. One is just where is, I don't want to assume that I know all of the health and wellness trends out there. So I just want to understand what type of franchises are even growing at this moment, and what are not. I realize food and beverage or certain types of food and beverage are not growing. So let's discount food and beverage. Let's focus on things that I know a little bit more about and I'm passionate about, things that actually made me excited. So knowing that I'm reading about gym type of franchises, IV therapy, or other kinds of red light therapy, I started getting excited and I was actually really interested. So I knew already that I'm like, oh, I want to read these franchise disclosure documents versus like reading a frozen yogurt franchise disclosure
Yeah.
document, for example, right? That bored me, and the other stuff I was like super super into. Second, it just gave you so much more information than you would able to get on your own. And then third, it actually started giving me an understanding of how to do sales and marketing. I am an operations and strategy person. I am not a sales and marketing person. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. I know that was my weakness, and it started giving me a sense of what are looking at a particular franchise, how do they market themselves? What's their marketing strategy, right? What is their template for how do they help their own franchises? How do they help themselves grow as a business? So think about that franchise. Is it a worthwhile franchise to partner with? And then how are they going to be supporting their own businesses? But it also just gave me an understanding of how do you market small businesses in general.
Yeah, yeah, that's brilliant. You're pulling the sales and marketing plans from all these. Now, were you getting most of that from the franchise disclosure documents, or were you getting those in conversations with the
I
franchisors?
was getting it. It's usually not the first conversation, it's the second and the third conversation that you
Yeah,
have with a franchise. Because at some point you get to talk to a marketing person and the CEO.
interesting. So you're getting to piece together how all these different businesses are marketing, and you can sort of create your own Franken marketing plan from the different component pieces of what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The reason why you want to do that is because you want to make sure that you validate and differentiate your offering, right? You can't just assume that just because there is a franchise out there that there is a demand for it. So you got to test out that idea and that particular product with real people around you. So I could say, hey, to anybody really, like my neighbors, my friends, and say like, what do you think about this kind of business, right? That's the easiest way to triangulate, validate, and figure out, is my offering going to be really differentiated? What are the things that could potentially set me apart? Are people going to want to come here? And then will my own particular strengths as a business person be able to help me solve a problem better than my competitors?
Yeah. How did you validate the customer demand? I mean, it makes sense to me that you would pull some of the sales and marketing strategies and look at those and then compare to what types of businesses are growing versus not growing. How did you validate without, you know, diving in and
So I
buying it?
was in this sense, I was evaluating a whole bunch of different businesses. It was because I was evaluating existing businesses, I could go straight to the people who actually use those businesses and
Right.
ask them, what do you like about this particular? I was evaluating, for example, I was evaluating a cycling franchise at the same time. So I thought maybe, maybe there's a couple of businesses that I could think about.
Yeah.
So I started talking about the people who are taking that, taking, the classes, the most active people are taking those classes. Again, because you're a local business, it's easy to find out, hey, I didn't realize that my neighbor or my son's coach uses this gym. Let me talk to that person, right?
Did you put it out to your network, or were you just stalking people outside the doors of these cycling studios as they came out?
I started not it's a little bit of a combination of both. You have to put it
Yeah.
out to your network, and I can also, fortunately, when something exists already, you can visit it, and then you can say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that." We're a small town. We're a town of 50,000 people. I didn't realize that you went to this studio. Tell me what you like about this. What have you been seeing? What teachers do you like? Right? What instructors do you like? What?
Yeah.
Why do you go to this place versus the other gym down the street? And what would you change about this particular gym if you could change this particular gym?
Love it.
And same thing with the cryotherapy business. I was a member, so I already had, once I started thinking about it as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, I was like, this is exactly what I would do with this place. I would do, I would change how I would do the process. I would change how I would change the demo, the target market. So I started realizing that my particular center was really targeting um, athletes, CrossFitters, things like that. And I wanted to change a little bit of that demographic and target it to just people with inflammation. Like the athletes will find cryotherapy, but people like me might not necessarily find cryotherapy. And we're
Yeah.
the ones that actually need it, right? I always, whenever a mom or a dad brings their athlete into the center, I go, it's really great that you're taking your son here for injuries or for performance, but guess what? You're more important. You're the one that's taking your son, from one place to another, and you're probably not taking care of yourself. Have you thought about inflammation in your body?
Yeah. Well, Catherine, those are some great answers. I think we've covered two or three things. We've covered how to get an industry overview and how to look at customer validation. What else was on your due diligence checklist, and what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can't avoid financials. So that's another thing that you have to
Well, you
just
can. I've seen people do it. I don't recommend it, but go
I
ahead.
I also don't recommend it because at the end of the day, that is what's going to tell you what does you have to price a business, right? Especially
Yep.
when you're buying something versus starting something from scratch. But even if you're starting something from scratch, you have to come up with a financial plan. So no, the next thing to do is to develop a financial plan. If there's existing financial information in the business that you're trying to evaluate. In my case, that's what I was doing. Uh, Start to make your own financial model. And if you can't make your own financial model, you better find someone who can make a financial model or learn how to do it really quickly. You can do that through, so many ways using ChatGPT and other AI tools to do that. But at the end of the day, you have to be very conservative. I think most entrepreneurs, kind of think that they will continue to grow their business, 5% month over month or whatever it is, 30% year over year. You have to really create models that are honest, and leverages your own strengths and weaknesses. So if you are somebody who's like myself that is not strong in marketing, you better put more money on the sales and marketing side of things because you are going to be leaning on services that will help improve your sales and marketing, right? But maybe less on the operation side because I will be that's basically my strong suit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Many banks that lend on these type of small business deals, when they get the cash flow projections, what they will do is they'll discount them by 50% and say what happens in this event, right? What
Right.
happens to the debt ratios and their ability to pay back the money. I'm a big fan of building cash flow projections because in every business I've done it in, the thing I always find is there are really only three or four numbers at the end of the day that really matter to any financial model. And when you have to build your own, you figure out what those three or four numbers are. And instead of focusing on 50 things, you're like, well, man, if I'm in a food business, food cost and labor cost, right? It's only a few things that really move the needle.
That's you're absolutely right. It's your, what are you going to make? What are your major costs? And then what's your debt, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you feel comfortable about taking on this business. That'll help you understand, is this my primary business, right? Is this the thing that will feed my family? You have to be honest about that. Or is this number two, is this a business that is more of like a side business? Something that I will keep, maybe hire a general manager to really undertake, but this is not the thing that will feed my family, right?
Yeah.
Or number three, I can't do this. This is not a business that I really want to be part of. But you have to be honest about one, two, or three, and based on one, two, or three, that will help you um, really understand where to undertake this business or not.
Yep. So you built, I'm sure you've done this many times before, you built an Excel spreadsheet, I'm sure, that was super ninja and incorporated a lot of these historical trends you saw in the financials. Did you do anything else to validate the financials that they were giving you?
You have to. Unfortunately, with small businesses, it's hard to do that. The you know the biggest validation is past performance, right? Past performance will always tell you what your future performance could be. I think where business owners or entrepreneurs who are looking at an existing business kind of, and I fell into this trap too, which is, you know what, I'm going to do better, right? I'm going to do a whole lot better than
Oops,
what.
you're above average.
That's right. I'm above average. Everyone thinks they're above average, right? And that's when you go like don't think you're above average and be realistic about the financials that you're seeing. Another way to usually the financial projections you're getting, fortunately, are through an accountant. It has to be through an accountant, otherwise, because this is this type of financial information that are being used to report, to tax authorities. So that's the best way that you know that these numbers are real or not. When I was evaluating other, particularly food and beverage businesses, it was really important to understand where exactly did the money come from, like where especially when something doesn't feel right to me, knowing the market for boba or knowing the market for, whatever. Uh, the expenses are the expenses, but the top line is the one that you're like, how can this be? Let's drill down on, if you're telling me that you're making a $500,000 on boba, tell me exactly where those sources of information are, right? Is this from an event? Are you event heavy? Or are you going to the Alameda Market Fair and this is where your money's coming from? Is this really the brick and mortar place? Or is it something else? Right?
So that sounds like what's two different things you've mentioned. Sounds like one, you're talking with the seller, whoever the rep is for the business, and you're going line by line through the revenue line items and saying, tell me about your boba tea. Where do you sell this? How much is in store? How much is out of store? How much is to go orders versus, whatever. And then it sounds like the other thing you did you get tax returns from them and do something where you're comparing those with the financials they were providing or?
Yeah, that's right. You have to ask for their accountant to be able to provide that information, because if you're just saying that this is my P&L, how are you going to validate that this is truly your P&L? So once you get looped into someone's accountant, that's when you're like, all right, this is an actual legit business.
Got it. Because now you've got somebody's CPA license on the line when they're giving you data.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So any other things on your due diligence checklist that were particularly important?
I think um the another thing about a due diligence checklist is really the employees themselves.
Okay.
Do you like the people that you are? In my case, it's either inheriting, right? In the case of US cryotherapy, when I made the decision, the third piece on the due diligence puzzle is, what am I getting here from a people perspective? These are the people that will be working for me. Um, do I have a lead? Do I have a manager? Am I going to be the manager of this business? That was where I had to wrap my head around the population of hourly people. I was very much used to salaried employees, people with MBAs, people who have PhDs in data science, or uh, very strong backgrounds that come from Berkeley and NYU, right? What kind of population am I inheriting? Because it's a completely different type of a completely different business that I'm used to.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you had kind of a leg up because you were a customer, so you got to experience some of these employees firsthand. Once the switch flipped for you and you were thinking, I might buy this business, how did the conversations you were having with employees of the company change?
So it became both. It was kind of funny before I was talking to the owners, right? And we started getting into the due diligence mode, and I'm not talking to the employees, and I'm evaluating the employees as if they were going to be my employees, but they don't know that yet.
Yeah.
So I started actually testing them out on, like, talk to me about this. What are the benefits of cryotherapy? How do you explain this to someone? So I started evaluating them on
Just
their
as a
just
customer, you're just in there, you're getting your cryotherapy, and you just
yeah,
start asking them some questions like, how do you explain this to people?
yeah. How do you explain this to people? What's your process? What's your how do you what do you think about this business? Why do you think how do you think about selling a membership? Because we're a membership driven type of business. How do you think about selling a membership to someone, right? And
Yep.
start, it's I don't want to say it's an interview, but it is pretty much an interview of every single person that I knew worked there. So I started getting an understanding of, like, who do I want to keep and who maybe doesn't necessarily fit you from a personality perspective, because it is going, whether you like it or not, you are the manager. And that case, you made the decision that I'm going to manage this place. And is this the kind of people that would be working for me? Will they get my story? Will they understand my passion for bringing health and wellness to the community?
Yeah.
Or is this just a job for them, right?
Yep. Interesting. Then, so you were in a unique position to be able to interview them without them really knowing, right? Where
That's
you're
right.
asking those questions. Are there any other things you did on the employee assessment side?
I think that was the biggest one. And once we actually started telling people that I'm interested in buying this, and we have an end date in terms of the due diligence, started getting to know them as people. It's really important for me. Just anybody, any business, and any time that you're building a team, do you know who they are? Do they know who you are? How will you think about this business? What are your ideas for what you will be changing? But just getting to know people as human beings, right, is a very important thing for any person with a team.
So you do all this due diligence, you decide you're going to make an offer on the business. How do you decide what to offer? And I'd love for you to wear the hat of someone who does not have all your experience in business transactions, because that's going to be the majority of the audience we're talking to. So, how would you think about figuring out what it's worth and what to offer for it?
Yeah. So creating an offer to a business, valuing a business, is there is some science or math behind it, but a lot of times, especially when you're talking about a small business, it's a lot of art. And I've seen this through, multiple rounds of fundraising in my own tech experience. A lot of times, I'm doing this finger in the air, going like, I think a business is should be 13x its own multiple, or in around 2016, 2017, 2018, all the way up to like 2019, you're hearing tech companies having 30, 50x in terms of their ARR multiples, which is insane, right?
Yeah.
And now it's come down, it's closer to, 10x someone's ARR. In this case, it is a service business. It is a one location, brick and mortar. There's really, one kind of service that we're doing, and it's primarily membership driven. You number one, start looking at comparative businesses, and this is again something where you really have to do research on the internet because it's hard
Where
to
did
get
you
this
look?
information.
Where did you look and what did you find?
So started to go back to my franchise research of how would they, a lot of these franchise disclosure documents will have the sales for individual for all of their franchises. Again, it might be old information, might be like a point in time kind of thing, but it'll give you a sense of the expected revenue for your average franchise. So go with that, right? Look at what you have versus what do you think is an average franchise performance. Then look at comparators. There are valuations for a health and wellness business. Sometimes it's 1.3x, sometimes it's 1.5x. So make your best judgment of how do you actually value it based on your annual sales, right? So put an appropriate valuation on if the business was making something like $600,000 a year, put the appropriate multiple against it. Is it a 2x business? Is it a 1 point? Is it just straight 1x
Yeah.
business? And go with that. A lot
So
of
go ahead.
I was going to say, there's also a lot of when you're buying somebody else's business or when you're evaluating someone else's business, there's a lot of emotion to it, right? It could be a tech company, it could be US Cryotherapy, which is my business, but the owners have some sort of preconceived notion of what the business is valued because they built that up and they did a lot of work on it. But it's important to think about it from, what am I getting and what's the expected value for the business, and just remove all emotion with it. To be as unemotional as possible, right?
Yeah.
Can't help to have a little bit of emotion, but just really approach it as like, this is what the numbers tell me. Now, does this make sense?
Yep. So that's your consultant answer, which is helpful. Now I want to hear, in this specific case, how did you approach making an offer? What pieces of information did you pull in? How did you think about threading the needle between the art and the math?
Yeah. So I basically took the value of the just the sales of its memberships. And so whatever, straight
Recurring revenue?
the recurring revenue of the business, and then a little bit of the value of the equipment itself, because there's actually in the business like US Cryotherapy, there is value to the equipment. Our cryo chamber is almost $500,000 right
Yeah.
there. So it's an asset that I'm buying. I'm not buying, the LLC of the previous business. I'm buying an asset and
Yep.
then figuring out what do I think I'm going to make out of it. And then that's the number, I calculated all that. I triangulated it with other professionals that I knew were strong in valuing businesses. So I basically said, this is their annual sales. This is the value of, and including an accountant. I actually triangulated with a CPA. Value of their sales. This is the value of the equipment itself, and this is what I think I can expect to make on an annual basis. Here's my gut instinct on, and also actually the debt of the business too. So the business that came with some debt. So along with the debt of the business, this is what the owners are asking. This is what I want to offer. What do you think about this?
And did that adjust your price much, or did it just show you or validate that you were on the right track?
It validated more that I was on the right track of how to think about the business. So having kind of like different, a CPA values a business versus a business differently than an entrepreneur values a business differently than a consultant, values a business differently. So
So you put together the offer, you go through the closing process. Then what? I mean, it hasn't been that long, Kathryn, but I'm curious, how did the closing go, and what have you found surprise-wise since taking over, good and the bad?
So the for an actual business, for an actual purchase of a business, the closing was pretty quick. We did it in less than a month. The biggest challenges, so what did I have to do in order to close the business, right? Number one, I have to actually create my own LLC and move money to that LLC. I leverage Guided in order to use Rob's to finance my business. So I had to go through that process. That is not, that basically took me about 6 weeks from start to finish, from having initial conversations all the way to moving all of my to moving funds over to my
But
business bank account. Yeah,
give you the cash to. Now,
exactly.
did you use any debt, or did you end up buying the company completely in cash?
Completely in cash.
Got it. And did you do any seller financing as part of the deal?
We did not do any seller
Right.
financing.
Oh, got it. So you were able to purchase the business in cash, no debt. That obviously helps on your cash flow projections because you don't have that hanging over you. How has the business gone? Has it met your expectations, exceeded your expectations?
I think I am I'm someone who's always going to be hard on myself.
Okay.
So
Yeah, you worked at Bridgewater. It's trained into you.
yeah, exactly. I'm always going to be hard on myself, right? I think the number one thing that I learned is it's not really about the product, it's not about the service, it's not really about marketing, but it's about my agility to, number one, not get down on myself on days where things are not where things aren't going as expected. I never thought that, for example, scrubbing toilets will be part of my job,
Yeah, they
right?
don't prepare you for that at Berkeley, do they?
Oh no, they do not. Or Columbia, where I got my master's, they do not. They did not. That did not come up. So knowing that you will have good days and you will have bad days, but the good days are great because you're hands-on, you're super personal, you have a lot more control over your future, you have a lot more purpose, right? And I'm connected to the community. Every person that walks in my door is somebody in my community,
Yeah.
right? I'm servicing somebody. I'm literally helping my neighbors live healthier lives. And
Yeah,
there's
you're keeping people out of chemo.
That's right. Yeah, there is 100, there's a purpose to that. Um, I think people, influencers in LinkedIn, you go on LinkedIn and it really makes it sound like it's easy, but it's in reality, it takes so much more grit and experience and
Yeah.
willingness to be vulnerable and partner with others to make the path easier, right? I think a lot of small business owners, especially ones who may not feel like they have others to rely on, kind of hold a lot of the weight of the day to day on their shoulders. And I certainly experienced, that. um the next thing that I also learned is I have to go back to what I'm really good at, and that is goal setting. I'm really good at goal setting and planning and achieving whatever it is my goals are. That's just what I've done for the past 20 years, and that's what I've helped other companies do, right? So, the first couple of months where I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? It was actually my husband that, I had 1 week in July, Jeremy, where my power was cut off because of an electrical fire that
Well,
I
you
had to go.
do business.
That's right. I was 3 weeks into my business and
So,
my building shut off my power because of an external fire issue. And
is
that
there any insurance coverage with that, or you just had to eat it?
there is, but as a small business, you don't want to start taking your premium on week 3.
Yeah.
You're especially in California, that insurance company will not renew you, right?
Yeah.
Week 3, and all of a sudden I have to go to my insurance and say, like, sorry, I lost money in my, this whole week. Please give me money back, right? Not a great idea. So, and that's actually what the building told me. They're like, go to your insurance. And I said, are you kidding me? I will never get renewed for business insurance. So that was week 3 of my ownership, right? And I
That's a
have to
mentality tester.
what's that?
That's a mentality tester for sure.
Oh my God, yeah, I have to tell my members that I have no power. I don't know when it's going to come back, and oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, right? So, in those times, my husband actually was the one that told me, like, go back to doing what you know best, which is, okay, get through this short thing, um, figure out what you need to do to get through this crisis, and then start actually planning. Go back to your financial model. Go back to your strategic plan that you thought about for this business, and say, I am now the owner, and I have learned now for the first whatever 4 weeks, 8 weeks of your business. It's going to change, and
Yeah.
that's okay, right? My assumptions have changed. How I think about businesses, how I think about that business has changed now, but then you have a better ability to plan for it. So I went back to my old goals, and rejigged my old goals to think about, all right, what do I want to do? How do I want to actually double down, or improve my sales and marketing, or what are those target markets demographics that I want to go after? What's my plan of action behind that? And then how do I break it down into quarters and then months, and then coming up with the process for looking back at my previous month and thinking about what were the successes, and what were the failures that I had this month, and how will I pivot the following month.
Yeah. So in many ways, you were lucky that you had this event happen 3 weeks in, because it forced you to sort of take a step back and go, okay, wait a second. Just because I built this plan before I took over this thing doesn't mean it's right. So I need to be prepared to adjust.
That's right. That's exactly right. So it really forced me to reevaluate, what my original assumptions were, and now actually have a realistic plan going forward.
Yeah. Where were your assumptions most off? Curious.
My assumptions were most off on sales and marketing, as it always is, because again, it's not my strong suit. So I should have, doubled down on what I think is the right way to market and sell the products of my business. Other things that are off is other things that are off. Your biggest cost, at least my biggest costs are electrical, and also my rent, my landlord, right? So really understanding what's covered by your monthly rent, what's covered by your annual, something called your maintenance, that sort of thing. So it kind of like the boring stuff, right? The boring but really really important things that you have to make sure that you have a handle on it, and you go back, oh, that's what they meant by that cost. Now I have to
Yeah.
start thinking forward, how to allocate for that particular rent cost that I didn't really understand when I read through the new lease agreement.
Yeah. I'm curious now, you've been in the business for what, almost a year?
Almost a year, yeah,
Almost a year.
9 months, almost 9 months.
How does life compare to life when you were consulting full time for these big name companies? Like, if you had to do it all over again, would you? And, if not, why not? Or if yeah, why? Why so?
um would I so fortunate, one of the things that I realized, especially towards the end of the year, when I mentioned that, is this your primary business? Is this your secondary business? Or is this, get me out of it, kind of don't even think about this business. I went through that exercise and realized that this really needs to be my secondary business, and not necessarily my primary business. So managing through being the owner of US cryotherapy here in Danville really made me be plugged into the community, and made me really understand what it takes to build a small business, almost not necessarily from scratch, but pretty close to what's this turnaround situation that I had to do with this business. But I realized that this isn't the thing that will pay my bills, right? This is not something where it can take me back to my old tech company days
At
of
least not with retail
At least
location.
not with one. Yeah, either I buy more. That's exactly right. I went through the process of like, do I do multiple of these? Right? Do I find other franchise business, or do I do something else? And I see firsthand how businesses now struggle with scaling operations and long-term strategy. And fortunately, I found a co-partner to launch my own advisory firm with my partner. It's called Team Tree Advisors. And my partner is somebody with a background in capital markets and global macro. So we have a lot of similar strengths, but also a lot of different strengths, really complementary strengths. So we're two people that really know what it takes to build and grow businesses, not just really from a corporate perspective, but from the ground ups as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah.
why we started thinking about it is we're really kind of in a weird, unprecedented time where there's so much market fluctuation, there's so much economic uncertainty. We haven't been in this age or this time in a really, really long time. There's a lot of rising risks now that makes running businesses a lot more challenging than ever. And really, I'm starting to see that the difference between those who fail and those who thrive are the ones who don't understand the big picture, like forces that shape the market or industry that you're in. So you're constantly in reactive mode. So think about a bakery right now, right? The price of eggs is in the price of eggs are in the news, and
Yep.
it's on top of mind. So think if you are a bakery right now and you are your egg costs are increasing by 20% this year, is that a big deal to you or is that a little deal to you, right? And what do you do to pivot, knowing that this is going to be a huge cost driver? Plus all the tariffs around here. Like we get most of our butter from Canada, right?
I've got a buddy who builds, and he gets all of his build stuff from either Canada or Mexico, and so he is freaking out and has been freaking out for more than a year, thinking about what impact it's going to have on his business.
That's right. So we've launched this business called King Tree so that we can help other businesses basically stay ahead and build a business that actually lasts and help businesses navigate these challenges by applying by applying macroeconomic insights to help you make smarter, more strategic decisions rather than just kind of thinking about business from hey, let's look at your business, let's due diligence you, let's think about your strategy, but no, let's think about the bigger picture of where you live in and the life that you live in. We have experienced super low interest rates for such a long time that we believe that is right. But last year when I went to get a small business thinking, hey, how can I finance this business? Should I go this route or that route? Should I go small business loan? No one's going to give a small business loan to a first time entrepreneur, or you're going to get it at like 12, 13, 14% interest rate. At least that's what my experience was.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what I'm hearing from you, Kathryn, is you got into this business. I think one of the realizations you had as you were looking at it is, hey, this path for me to grow, either I've got to take on multiple units or I've got to turn this into something that's sort of a secondary business and do something else. Sounds like you chose the secondary business path and are now going down, hey, I'm going to take what I know from the consulting world, but I'm going to build my own sort of way of delivering that in a way that fits with the lifestyle that I want versus where you were at before working for these other companies.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly right.
Well, congrats, Kathryn. Thanks so much for spending the time breaking down your story. I know we spent a lot of time on the due diligence piece, but I think you have a lot of nuggets to share with people that most don't have the experience to even think through. So I really appreciate you slowing down to go through some of the examples of how you got that information and how you thought about using that to validate the opportunity.
It was my pleasure. This is so great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.